Daf Kuf Yud 110 in Masechet Sanhedrin, very close to the end. And yesterday we got up to discussing Korach. He was the next generation, not generation, but group of people, Korach v'Adato, who didn't have a Chelek L'Olam Haba according to the Mishnah. There was an argument about it, etc. So we got to the list of people. Korach we talked about, Datan Aviran, and then the fourth person on the list is On Ben Pelet, who drops off the list, right? On Ben Pelet is not involved when they actually get punished and end up getting killed. So we said yesterday that On Ben Pelet Bnei Ruvain is because he was Ra'ah v'Havin, which implies he was Choser. He realized that this was a bad idea and he came back from it. But today Rav says, we're 4 lines in the bottom of Kuf Tet Amud Bet, Amar Rav, that in fact it wasn't himself, it was his wife. Sorry, On Ben Pelet Ishto Hitzilato. Now 3 lines in the bottom. His wife is the one who actually saved him from participating with Korach. What happened? Amrale, she said to him, look, you're not the leader either way. What do you care if you follow Moshe, you follow Korach? Imar Rabba, if Moshe is in charge, on Talmidah, you're a student. Imar Rabba, if Korach's in charge, on Talmidah, you're a student, meaning why are you getting involved in this fight where you have nothing to really gain from it, and you're just getting in trouble? So Amar Lasu, he said to his wife, okay, you speak a lot of sense, but my Avid, what do I do? Havai be'etzah, I was in the meeting, I was in the, whatever council they had, and I swore that I was going to go with them, and I committed, and I can't give up on that. So Amrale, she said to him, and this is very interesting, of course, but it's meant very seriously, that Amrale, she said to him, these people, Yadana, Dekula Kanishta Kadishta Ninu, that this is a holy congregation, meaning that the people, obviously, the Pasuk does not view Korach Zadato as being very righteous, but they're committed for whatever reason to being holy and to being pure and to being close to God. And as it says, Kikol Eida Kulam Kedoshim, that was their argument to Moshe, that were all Kadosh. So clearly they were practicing that way. And so you can basically use their religiosity against them. Amrale, she said to him, look, here's what you should do. Tuv, you rest, sit down. And I'll take care of you. I'll save you, his wife said. So what did she do? Ashkita Chamra, she gave him a bunch of wine. She gave him a nice strong shot of whiskey. Arvite, and he got drunk. Ignati Gavai, and she lay down. He went to sleep because he was not, he was drunk. So he's fast asleep inside in their house, inside their tent. V'yitfa Ababa, she sits down on the entrance of the tent. Turn to Daf Kuf Yud Amud Aleph. And she sits down at the entrance to the tent, Visatre the Mazye, and she exposes her hair as if she was washing it, And so obviously it probably means a little more than that she was more exposed. She was like washing in the front of her porch. She was laying out there, sun tanning, but it was unpleasant for people to come. And called the Adda Chazi Hadar. Everyone who came and saw her turned around. They didn't want to come and, be intimate with her in that way and expose themselves to them. So everyone who came to call On ran away as soon as they came. And of course, time passed and they had other things going on. They were fighting with Moshe and Ivlahu, and they were all swallowed up into the ground. And by the time he wakes up, he's saved. So his wife was the one who actually led to him being saved. Now, on the flip side, Korach was sort of led astray by his wife, because his wife said to him, Amrale, his wife said to him, look, Moshe, look at Moshe, look at what he's doing to you. Havi Malka, he's the king. Obviously, Hashem made him the king, but he was the king. He's lording it over us. The Achva, Achu, Shavi Kanarab, his brother somehow was the best candidate for Kohen Gadol. The Bnei Achohi, for his brother's children, meaning his nephews, become Shavinus Sagani Kohana. They become the Skanim, they become the Kohanim, right? The Kohanim was the family of Aaron. And what happens? Yatya Truma, right? If someone comes to the Beit HaMikdash or the Mishkan on that day and says, I want to bring my gift of Truma, Amartinu l'Kohen, it goes to, not to you, it goes to the Kohen. Yatu Maaser, Maaser comes, remember the Korach was a Levi, like Moshe, you get Maaser, Shekatu Natun, you're going to take it, but remember, there's a new rule, Amar Havu Chadmi Asar the Kohen, you got to give 1/10 of it to the Kohen first. And forget about just taking all the money. Oh, the guys, right? Remember the parsha right before is that Moshe, and Hashem, but told Moshe, but Moshe cut off all your hair. He shaved your head. You had this beautiful hair, and Hashem, Moshe cut it all off. Umitalto bechuki kufta. He's treating you like kufta is Rashi plays a negative term for like dung. Like he's treating you like nothing. Like you're just a part. You have no identity anymore. You don't get anything. You have no control. You're being totally manipulated in this whole thing. Eina yahav b'mazaychel. You know what happened was he looked at your hair and he was jealous and he thought it was beautiful. So he came up with this rule that everybody's got to cut their hair. Everyone's got to look, homogeneous among the Levium. So his wife is sort of egging him on, about how humiliated and insulted he's been by Moshe. Now, I'm not allowed. He says to his wife, I mean, I'm no fan of Moshe, maybe, but all the Levium shave their heads. So Moshe was one of them. There's no indication that he was exempted from this. So his wife said to him, yeah, of course he did it. He's going down with the castle, as they say, right? Kivan de kula rabuta didei. Since he's got all the power anyways, he doesn't care. Amar iunami tamot nafshi and plishtim. He said, as the famous quote that we always use from Shimshon, "I'll die with the plishtim," meaning I'll go down with the ship. I don't mind getting embarrassed if they're going to embarrass and take away the manlyhood and the power and the beauty of Korach. So basically, her argument of Korach was that, you're a very powerful man, and Moshe is going out of his way to strip you of all your power, and one step at a time. And if you don't stand up now, by the time you turn around, you're going to have nothing left. And furthermore, she said to him, Moshe doesn't make any sense anyways. And it's not clear how these things are connected. Obviously, many, many drashot about this. But she said to him, look, he just said to you, and this is why the parsha right before Korach was, the parsha tzitzit. The kamer lechu avditu techelta. He said to you, make your tzitzit and make tchelet on the corner of your tchelet. Now, if really Moshe makes any sense and tchelet is an important mitzvah, so why is only one part? Why don't you take a whole shirt, a whole glima, right, a whole cloak made out of tchelet, because kasinu lekulu metiftach, and you can cover all of the students, right? And again, so there's a lot of different questions about what exactly she was saying, but partly, remember, Korach was very, very rich, and tchelet was very expensive. So in some ways, this is him showing off. I can take, this small amount of tchelet that you put in a beged because they can't afford maybe more. I am wealthy and I can cover my whole thing with tchelet. So I can do things greater than Moshe. I can do it over everyone. Either way, Hainu Dichtiv, this is what it refers to and says in Mishlei, Chachmot Nashim Banta Beita. The wisdom of a woman can build a house. That's Ishto Shalom Ben Pela to help save him from falling after Korach. Velet biada tarsena. But when she's got velet in her hand, when she's got lies in her hand, that will destroy a house. Zu Ishto Shel Korach. That is the wife of Korach. So that's Rab's drasha. Now going back to the psukim of Korach, it says, "Vayikum lefnei Moshe." We are, I don't know how to say it, around 15 lines or so from the top, middle of the line. They got up in front of Moshe. The pasuk says, "Anashim mibnei Yisrael." The people from Bnei Yisrael who joined Korach, 50 umatayim nisiyei eda, 250 nisiyei eda. What does that mean that they were anashim miyuchadim shebe'eda, or nisiyei eda? Actually, is what we're darshaning. They were miyuchadim shebe'eda. They were the select people. These were not regular people. These were really renowned and powerful people and knowledgeable people. Kriyei Moed. Why are they called Kriyei Moed? Because they could call out the holidays. They were smart. They had all the wisdom of astrology and numbers and all the things that we've talked about to actually calculate the months and the years, which was a very high level of sophistication. Anshe Shem, why were they called Anshe Shem? Shaylem Shem b'chol olam. They were world renowned. These were people who've got, they published and they were known, not exactly what Anshe Shem, right? It's obviously a funny thing to talk about, but they were very, very notable, powerful people, and they argued with Moshe. They sided with Korach. Vayishma Moshe v'yipal. Now Moshe heard what they said and he fell on his face. Now what does it mean? Vayishma implies that he heard something besides what they argued, right? What did he hear? Ma shmu'a shama. What did Moshe hear that made him so despondent? Amar Shmuel Nachmani Amar Yonatan. What Moshe heard was besides all the arguments that we've heard about Moshe taking power and blah 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 blah. But all they said was, they added to it, shechashdu me'eshet ish, that they spread rumors that Moshe is sleeping with married women. So they spread rumors about Moshe, and he heard about this, that, you can't trust Moshe with your wife. People go to him. We never know what's going to happen. Things have occurred. Shenemer vayikanu Moshe b'machana. It's a crazy pasuk, Rabbi Yochanan is saying. It says, this is a pasuk in Tehillim, that they it literally means they were jealous about Moshe in the Machaneh, but the way Rabbi Yonatan is explaining Rabbi Yonatan is that every man went to his wife and said, wait a second, I want to give you kinoi. I want to warn you about being alone with Moshe, right? Because the Parsha Sota, you warn a woman if you're worried that she's going to be intimate with a man. And every man in Bnei Yisrael went to their wives and said, you can never be alone with Moshe because Moshe is suspect. And that's the reputation he got. Amr Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak, sorry, I read it a little early. So Reb Shmuel bar Yitzchak, Melamed shekol echad ve'echad kinei et ishto min Moshe. Every person in Bnei Yisrael suspect, not one person, everyone suspected Moshe. Shenemar and Shmuel bar Yitzchak has a crazy shot in this pasuk. Shenemar, as it said, we just had, Moshe yikach et ohel. Moshe took his tent, v'natalo michutz l'machareh, and he left the camp. So obviously, the psukim imply that's because Hashem and the Egel, but Shmuel bar Yitzchak is saying it's because Moshe was basically kicked out of the camp. That everyone said your wives can't be alone with Moshe, he can't be alone with anybody. He had to go live all by himself outside the tent. So this was obviously incredibly distressing for Moshe, and you could see now, a little bit more of the personal fight that happened in Korach and his Hadato and Moshe, and that's why he was Nafal Panav. So it continues, so Moshe got up and he went to the Tan B'Aviran to try to talk to them. Amr Reish Lakish, what you see from here says Reish Lakish, you're never allowed to hold on to an argument. If there's an argument and there's something you can do to let go of it, even if it's like Moshe, who's clearly the leader, going from his tent, going to the Tan Aviran, trying to negotiate with them, even though they started this up and they're horrible people to him, you have to do anything possible to try to dissolve, try to let go of a machloket. Dama Rav, as Rav said, and Reish Lakish is quoting now, or the Gemara at least, more than that, if you hold on to an argument, again, even if you're right, there's nothing to do with being right. Moshe was clearly right in this case. But if you hold on to an argument and you make it stronger and you make it more persistent, you are over a lotase. Don't be like Korach. And that's what they did. They were not allowing this machloket to end. Rav Ashi says that if you hold on to a machloket, you should get sarat, meaning you're deserving of being sarua. Because it says biyad Moshe lo. It says here by Korach that Moshe's hand for him. It says when we talk about yad, of course, going back to Mitzrayim, by Yomer Hashem lo, before Mitzrayim at the Sneh, Hashem said to Moshe, Od havei na yadcha b'cheikacha. So the word yad in your shirt, which then was with sarat, Kishelik, remember that the yad is Moshe is referring to sarat. Amar Rav Yossi said Rav Yossi on a related discussion about arguing with or making machloket in place where there isn't necessarily one. Kol hacholek al machut beit David. Anyone who makes an argument and disputes, and the same way that Korach was doing to Moshe, that someone does to Machut Beit David, Ra'oi lahakishon nachash, they should be bit by a snake. Because K'tiv Hachad says in Melachim, Vayizbach Adoniyo Tzono Bakar Mari im Even Hazochelet. Remember, this is when Adoniyo was trying to rebel before Shlomo was crowned against David, and he slaughtered these animals on the Even Hazochelet. Now, Zochelet, I'm not sure what it means there, it's stone of Zochelet, but Zochelet elsewhere means something that crawls, right? That is a snake. It says in Devarim, in the end of Devarim, Chamat Zochale Afar, the Zochal, the one that crawls in the dirt. So that's referring to a snake. Amar Rav Chisda, the first wide line we are, right? The first of the widest lines. Says Rav Chisda, Kol Cholek al Rabo, it's not just the Malchut Beit David, but anyone who argues with their teacher, Kicholek al Shechina. It's like they're arguing with the Shechina. Of course, this is a reference to Korach. Shinamar, because it says by Korach, Batzutam al Hashem, that they fought against God. They didn't fight against God, they fought against Moshe, but fighting against Moshe is like fighting against Hashem. Amr Rabbi Chama, Rabbi Chanina, Kol Sem Rivam Rabo, if you make a meriva, right, you make a quarrel, a disagreement, not just arguing, but you just start making trouble with your teacher, Kosem Shechina, it's like doing with the Shechina, Shenemers, it says, Hema Meim Riva Sheravu B'nai Yisrael Hashem, it refers to the Meim Riva, that B'nai Yisrael fought with Hashem. Again, they fought with Moshe, or they didn't fight, but they argued with Moshe about getting them food, but it was like they were fighting with Hashem. Amar Chanina bar Papa, furthermore, call mitraim al Rabbo, anyone who's mitraim, which means they complain, they find fault, not necessarily even arguing, but they claim, he's not appropriate or he's doing something wrong. That's ki'ilu mitraim al Shechina. It's like they're fighting with the Shechina. Shenemar lo aleinu tlunotechem ki im al Hashem. As they said, you're not arguing with us. You're by the man. It's with Hashem. Forget about even arguing. Someone who even has thoughts that their Rebbe, that their teacher is suspect of doing something wrong, again, without founding. If the person's wrong, they're wrong. But a person who makes up sort of arguments and crafts, made up accusations, again, it's as if they're doing this to the Shechina. It says they spoke about Hashem, and Moshe puts them together in terms of the arguments. Now, back to Korach. Pasuk says in Kohelet, we read, of course, on Sukkot, Osher Shamor Leba'alav L'Ra'ato, that sometimes there is richness that is hidden, that is put aside for its owner to cause evil to that person, right? So what is that referring to? When does richness cause someone to have fall down or to have bad? Amarish Lakish Zeh Osher Shel Korach. That's referring to the Osher of Korach. Korach was so wealthy, but because he was so wealthy, we'll talk about it in a second, it led him to rebel against Moshe and to think he was going to be greater than he was. That's called Yakuma Shibraglehem. It talks about in this is a whole different context, but that you're gonna remove all the yakum, all the things that come up that's under their feet. What is that referring to? Lazar Zememono Shel Adam. Yakum, which usually means grass and things like that, things that are growing, but here it means the mammon, the money of a person, shemamido al raglo, right? It's like a describing the word. It's something that is yakum. It keeps you up. It picks you up on your feet because without money, it's very hard to have your own identity and your own independence. Reb Levi says, Reb Levi, when you think about how rich Korach was, the keys, all the safe deposit keys of all the storage houses of riches of Korach needed 300 donkeys to carry them. So not the riches, but the actual, just the opening, that's the codes, required 300 donkeys. And don't think it's because they were keys that were made out of metal. Kulu aklidi uklipi digilda. They're all made out of, all the aklidi and klipi, all the keys and the locks were made out of leather, which is, Rashi explains one shot here, is that it's lighter than metal. And still, there were so many of them. He had so many storage houses. I'm not really sure where they were exactly because they were traveling through the desert, right? So we don't know where Korach kept his self-storage of his riches, but maybe he left it in Egypt or somewhere along the way. But it was so much wealth that he had that it took 300 donkeys to carry the keys. Amar Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina, where did he get this from? That there were shalosh matmaniot hitmin Yosef in Mitzrayim. When Yosef accumulated all this billions and billions of dollars in Egypt, when he accumulated all the wealth, there were he basically hid and put aside 3 storage houses of money, basically, or riches and jewels in Mitzrayim, right? And Echat Nitzgala Korach. One of them was found and taken by Korach. Again, context is very hard to understand, but Korach had these tremendous riches in Mitzrayim. I know the Jews were slaves and they were all, didn't have grain. Somehow Korach had incredible wealth, either separate from that or maybe when they were leaving, he found it. Either way, Korach discovered this tremendous treasure, like Indiana Jones. That was Korach. Achat nitkala Antininus ben Asvirus. One of them was found by Antininus, right? Antininus was the Caesar, right? The Caesar with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who was fabulously wealthy. He somehow, when he went to Egypt with Cleopatra and everyone, maybe they found another treasure. And achat gnuzel tzadikim latidofo. And the third has not been found. That's why all these people, are digging the pyramids to try to find the final treasure, but they're not going to find it, and it's only going to be revealed for tzadikim in latidofo.
Steinsaltz suggests that this was the emperor who's widely known as Caracalla, whose father was Septimus Severus, who was mostly an awful emperor, but he gave every resident of the Roman Empire Roman citizenship.
Okay. Was he the same? Was that the same Antoninus that we always talk about with Rebbe?
He's probably not the same Antoninus, because the Antoninus that we usually talk about was widely known as a really good emperor.
Got it. Okay. Interesting. Roman history. And remember, and the third is set aside for tzaddikim. Now says Rabbi Yochanan, when we think about Korach, remember that in the story of Korach, there were 250 people who brought the karbanot and they were burned by the fire, right? And then the ground opened up and killed Korach and his family. But says Rabbi Yochanan, Korach was not included in either one of those. Lo hayu min abluim, he wasn't one of the people who was swallowed up. Lo min asrufim, he wasn't one of the people who was burned. Rashi says he died, don't worry, but he died in the Magefah. Remember, the third thing that happened was that there was a plague after Korach that killed many, many more people. So that Korach died in that plague. No min habluim. How do we know he wasn't swallowed up? Because it says that kol adam asher leKorach. The ground opened up and swallowed all the people who were part of Korach, but not Korach, below Korach, the people of Korach. V'lo min asrufim because it says v'chol eight chamishim u'matayim ish, the 250 men, but it doesn't add Korach. Below Korach, Korach seems to be left out of that list. Now, a Braita disagrees with that. Mandita Tana, a Braita said actually Korach had both of them. Korach min hasrufim umin habluim. He was burned up by the fire, and then he died, and then his body was swallowed up by the ground. So he was min hasrufin umin habluim. Min habluim, he was swallowed up because the pasuk says tivlautam ve'et Korach. You keep reading the pasuk, it says the ground swallowed them, and it swallowed Korach. Min hasrufim dichtiva teitei eish lifnei Hashem, and then the pasuk continues and says ve'eish yatsa me'et Hashem v'tochal at that. Anyways, our psukim have. Our Gemara sort of has part of this included in parentheses, part in Sograyim, but the more important part is the part on, I guess, 10 lines from the bottom. But tochal et chamishim u'matayim ish, and Korach b'hadayo. Korach was with them. There's no reason to assume Korach was separate from them. It doesn't say Korach was with them, but Korach went with them, and we assume they were all burned up.
So how does Rabbi Yochanan disagree with a Tanaitic source?
I think first of all, Rabbi Yochanan sometimes disagrees, and second of all, we're at a level here of agadita that I don't think the regular rules of fidelity are quite the same. But maybe at another source. Amar Rava. Now says Rava, what does it mean when it says, again, these are drashot that are going to take us to Korach. Why does it say it's a very unusual pasuk in Chabakuk, like most pasukim in Chabakuk, right? It says, Shemash Yareach Amad, the moon and the sun will stand, Amad Zvula, will stand in their zivul. Zvul means usually where someone lives, in their place of living, in their house. La'or chitzecha ya'alechu, to the light of your chitzim, of your arrows, they will go. What does that mean? Milami, what that tells you is shalu shemesh v'yareich l'zvul, that the shemesh nereich went into the zvul. The zvul is one of the rikiot in the Shemayim. And basically, they said to God, we're going on strike. How could you allow Korach to challenge Moshe? Amr lefanav, ribono shel olam, im ata osed din leven amram, they'd say, look, we have conditions here. If you stand up for Ben Amram, for Moshe, we will go out and be the sun and the moon, do our job. But if not, avim lav, lo they'd say, otherwise we're on strike. We're standing up for Moshe's kavod. You can't allow Moshe to be treated this way by Ben Amram, by Korach. So Hashem said to them, Hashem was like, threw arrows at them to say, get out of here. What do you, go back to your work. Because God said to them, right? When people stood up against me, God says, and everyone worships the sun and the moon, you didn't say, we're not going to do our job because people are bowing down to us, you got to kill them all. Right? So when people rejected Hashem and worshiped the stars and the moon, the sun and the moon, you were not mocheh. Now you're all sympathetic to Moshe Rabbeinu. And nowadays, whatever this means, Rashi is not so clear, the sun and the moon don't go out unless they are shot with arrows from Hashem. So they need a little kick in the pants in order to go out. Okay, so anyways, that's what the pasuk in Chabakuk is referring to. Darash Rava, now says Rava, what does it mean when Moshe said, Moshe says to Hashem, not Hashem, to the people, right? In Bria Yivra Hashem, if God creates a new creation, the Patzta Damat Pi on the land, earth opens up its mouth. Moshe was saying to Hashem, "In Bria Gehenom, if you already created Gehenom, God, the mutav, then this is the right time to use it. V'imlav Yivra Hashem, this is a time where we need something like Gehenom. We need people who are part of the world who need to be removed from the world." Says Gemara, what do you mean? What was he saying to Hashem? Lamai. What was he saying? You're saying, Hashem, please create a new thing called Gehenom. There's no new creations. There's nothing new in the world. Ella, what he was asking Hashem was the Krove Pitcha, is to make the opening closer to this spot. Right? Gehenom might exist in somewhere far away. But if you bring the opening of Gehenom to this spot and Korach and his family are swallowed up, that's the only appropriate thing. Now the pasuk says, not here, but in Pinchas, Ubnei Korach lo metu, right? That Korach was swallowed up, but his sons did not die. Tana mishum Rabbeinu Amru, they said in the name of Rabbeinu, Makom nitbatzel lehem begehenom. What that means is that they did fall down to the earth, to the hell, right? They fell down into the earth, but they have a place which is separated. Nitbatzer means betzurot. It's protected. It's built up around them in Gehenom where they don't die. V'yoshvu alav amru shira. They sit on this place and they sing songs to Hashem of praise, like the Tilim of Lamratzeach B'nei Korach Mizmor. Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, says Rabbi Bar Chana, I heard them. Zimna Chada, Habikazilna Ba'orcha. Remember, we had this in Bava Batra with the Rabbi Bar Chana stories. Remember, he was a very prolific world traveler of very mysterious things. So said Rabbi Bar Chana, I was once traveling wherever he traveled, and Amar Liyahu Taya, there was a Taya, which means like a tour, what do you call it, nomad, basically an Arab said to me, I know where you could come, give me $20, take a picture with me, right, and I'll show you the ones who were swallowed up by Korach. So he brought him to this place. Azla, he brought him chazoi trey bizi. He saw two holes in the ground. There were like fissures in the rock that there was smoke coming out of the ground, just in the middle of the desert. Shakal gevavad amar. He took a piece of wool, a dry piece of wool. Amshimai. He then soaked it with water, and otve breshuncha put it on the top of a spear. And he stuck it into the hole. And he got burnt. So you saw that there was tremendous heat coming out of this hole. So Gehenom. So he said to me, Atzit mashamat, bend down and listen. What do you hear? Right? And Shamit, and I heard that what I heard the sound coming from the ground was Moshe v'Torato emet v'hin badaim. Moshe and his Torah are truthful, and we, in the third person, we are liars, which was rejection, basically, ultimately, of Korach's argument against Moshe as being the main person. Amalei, and so the tour guide, the Taya, said to Rabbi Bar Chana, you know, every 30 days, Gehenom, they're like I don't know, some kind of cauldron where they're basically being cooked around and it circles around, and every 30 days it comes to this spot, and you know, it might be somewhere else in other days, but you can come here every 30 days and you could hear them saying, Vamruhachi, and you'll hear them saying, Moshe v'Torato emet, v'hein badaim, and they are liars. So that is the end of the story of Korach. Continues the Gemara now. We're on the third line, 2 dots of Kuf Yud Amud Bet. Dor Midbar, right? We're going backwards almost. Well, I guess it's later in terms of the story. The Dor Midbar Inlam Chelik Lom Haba. The generation of the Midbar, who were the ones who were the Meraglim, and all of them who died, which was everyone, they don't have a portion in Olam Haba. Tanur Rabbanan, says the Braita, Dor Midbar Inlam Chelik Lom Haba Shenemar, the Midbar Hazeh Yitamu, V'sham Yamutu, which is a double language. Yitamu b'olam hazeh, you'll die in this world. Sham yamutu, you'll be dead. L'olam haba. And it says, Asher nishbati ba'api. God says in Tilim, I swore in my anger, imi v'onam nuchati, I will not let them come for rest. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, that they don't get a portion. Rabbi Eliezer disagrees. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, hein ba'im l'olam haba. I disagree with that completely. Dor Midbar were killed, right? They didn't go into Israel, but they are coming to Olam Haba. Shenemar, as Hashem says, or as the pasuk says in Tilim, Isfuli Chasidai, gather for me my righteous people, Kortei Briti Alai Zebach, the ones who are my Koreit, my Brit, the ones who signed my covenant, which was the Dar Midbar, because they were at Har Sinai, they are going to be a Zebach for me. Elamani Mekayim, Hashem Nishpati Ba'api, but Hashem said, I swore with my anger that I'm not going to ever let them come to Menucha. What that means is, I swore in my anger, Ba'api Nishpati, but I changed my mind. It wasn't a true shvuah. It was a shvuah out of anger. But now that God's no longer angry, Chazrani bi, I went back against my shvuah, says Hashem, and I will accept them into Olam Haba. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says, yeah, well, I don't know about my opinion on Dor Midbar, but this pasuk that you just quoted is not referring to Dor Midbar. Lo nemar pasuk zu al keneged dorot habayim. This pasuk is referring to future generations, and now he's going to darshan each part of the pasuk. It says, "Isvuli chasidai, I will gather into me my righteous people." That's referring to righteous people in every generation. Elu tzadikim shebechol dar v'dar. Any generation of righteous people is gathered into Hashem. And Kartei Briti Alei Zevach, the ones who sign my brit are going to be a sacrifice for me. El Chananya, Mishal v'Azariah. That's referring to Chananya, Mishal v'Azariah in the Kivshan. Remember, Shemasru Atzman, took Kivshan Ha'esh. They put themselves into the burning fire, and they did not reject Hashem's brit, and they stayed true to Hashem. Alei Zevach, what does the end of the pasuk means? That those who are, to me, are those who are a sacrifice. That's referring to Ela Rabbi Akiva v'Chaverav shemasru atzman l'shchita divrei Torah. Tragically, they became a zevach. They were literally slaughtered for keeping and observing and committing to the Torah, and they will be with Hashem. Alei, they will be with me. Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe Omer. So Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe says, I disagree again with Rabbi Akiva, and the Dor Hamidbar ba'im hein l'olam haba. They actually will come l'olam haba. Shenemar, as it says, upiduye Hashem yeshuvun. Those who are redeemed by Hashem will come back. Uba'ut Sion Berina, they will come to Sion Berina. This is a very strange pasuk in this context because, it says they'll come to Sion. It does not say they'll come to Olam Haba. But obviously we are conflating many of these concepts of future places. What's Sion, what's Din, what's Olam Haba, etc. But they will come back. Amar Rabbi Chana, Amar Rabba Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says Rabbi Bar Chana named Rabbi Yochanan, Shavka Rabbi Akiva the Chasidutei. Rabbi Akiva, who was known, we'll see later today, I think today or maybe tomorrow, Rabbi Akiva was the one who always defended the regular people and said people would have a chelik in Olam Haba. He left behind his righteousness and he rejected the Dor HaMidbar, meaning he should have stuck with his original position that allowed everyone to come back. Shinemar, because the pasuk implies that in fact they will come back, because it says, "Haloch v'karata baznei Yerushalayim leimar," right? Very famous psukim. Call Yerushalayim, saying, "Zacharti lach chesed ne'urayach." I remember the kindness of your youth. Ahavat kilotayach, to go after me in the midbar. Lechdech acharei b'midbar be'eretz lo zeruah. So Hashem is saying to everybody, to Aznei Yerushalayim, you'll be like the Dor Midbar. Ma acherim ba'im b'zchutam. Other people are going to come in the zchut of the Dor Midbar who went after Hashem. They for sure are going to come back and either go to the Olam Haba or return to Yerushalayim, whatever the message is. So said Rabbi Bar Chana that Rabbi Akiva was mistaken in sort of abandoning his earlier kindness to reject the Dor HaMidbar, and in fact, they will have a place in Olam Haba. Okay, says the Mishnah now, halfway down Kuf Yud Amud Bet. The next and I think final one that we're going to talk about are Aseret HaShvatim, right? The 10 tribes. So there was a tragic story in the Melachim and also in Divrei Yamim that the 10 tribes, the Bnei Yisrael split up, as we learned last week, to Aseret Shvatim led by Yervam ben Nevad, and then many other Malchei Yisrael and the Malchei Yehuda, and the 10 tribes were exiled at some point. But says the Mishnah, Aseret HaShvatim einan atidim lachzor, they're not coming back. Shenemar, as it says, Vayashlichem al eretz acheret kayom hazeh. They're thrown out to another land like this day. Ma hayom holech le'ein chozer. The day is done. Once the day is over, it ain't coming back. Af hein holchim le'ein chozrim. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, I disagree. Af Omer, it's kiyom hazeh, is that the people are thrown away like this day. Ma yom mafilu meir, just like every day cycles on itself. It gets dark and then it gets light. And it happens again. Af Aseret HaShvatim shafila lehen. It was dark for them. They were rejected. They were thrown out of Eretz Yisrael. But kach atida lahir lahem. In the future, it will be bright and they will come back to the Am Yisrael. Tanur Rabbanan says the Braita. This is the Tosefta here. Aseret HaShvatim ein lam chilek l'olam haba. Right? Some change the girsa to be like our Mishnah. If you see on the right, at least I have it on the right, Einam atidim lachzor, they won't come back. Again, this gets to some of this conflating of, what's olam haba, what does coming back mean, what does omed ladin mean, but whatever, beyond the scope, I would say. But they are not going to get either a portion of olam haba, they're not going to come back, as our Mishnah said. Shenemar, as it says, vayitshem Hashem me'al admatam, Hashem will kick them off the land. This is in the Tochacha. Be'af u'bechema u'beketzef gadol. Uses 3 descriptions, right? 4 descriptions, right? Vayitshem Hashem me'al admatam, that's b'olam hazeh. Vayishlichem al eretz acheret, that is olam haba. Sorry, so we're talking about the beginning and the end, not the descriptions. Hashem will remove them from the land and send them to another land. One is olam hazeh, that they'll be physically exiled to wherever the 10 tribes are exiled to, and they'll never come back in olam haba. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, right? That's Rabbi Akiva, similar to what Rabbi Akiva said in our Mishnah, just a different pasuk, right? Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda ish Kfar Akka Omer, Mishum Rabbi Shimon. It's not what the pasuk means. What the pasuk means to say, and now this is going back to our Mishnah, which used the pasuk of Vayashlichem la'eretz acheret kiyom hazeh, right? That im masehem kiyom hazeh, if their actions are like they are today, then einam chozrim. But im lav, if they change their actions and they do tshuva and they become righteous again, then chozrim. Then in fact they will get an opportunity to come back and rejoin the Jewish people. Rebbe Omer, Rebbe disagrees and says, disagrees with Rabbi Akiva, and says, in fact, that they do have a portion of Olam Haba. Shenemar, as it says in the Nevuah, in Yeshaya, right, it says, Bayomahu yitaka b'shofar gadol, bo avdim eretz Ashur, and dachim eretz Mitzrayim, right, the whole discussion about the people being gathered in from far away, that's referring to gathering in all the people who are Aseret HaShvatim. Amar Rabba Bar Chanan Rabbi Yochanan, says Rabbi Bar Chanan Rabbi Yochanan, like he said in the previous Gemara, that Rabbi Akiva is wrong. Shafka Rabbi Akiva chasudate. Rabbi Akiva abandoned his chasidut, and he mistakenly abandoned his chasidut, shenemar, because in fact he's wrong, as it says in, this is near Yirmiyahu, but also haloch v'karata tadvar me'ila, go and call out this thing Tzafona to the north, which is where they went, where Bavel is. Marta, and say Shuva Mishuva Yisrael Num Hashem, right? Come back, the the people who are left from Yisrael, lo afil panai bachem ki chasid ani, I won't reject you, I am righteous, num Hashem, lo ator lo olam, I will never hold on to this grudge forever, meaning that Yirmiyahu said very clearly that they were coming back and that the 10 tribes would join the people. Now, says the Gemara, when Rabbi Chana said, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, twice now, that Rabbi Akiva made a mistake to leave behind his chasudate. My chasudate. What was the previous sort of, kindness and righteousness of Rabbi Akiva that we now are rejecting, right? So what was that? The Tanya, in fact, there's another bright, and this bright actually gets us to an introduction to the next Gemara, the last few daf of Sanhedrin, which is that until now, we've only been talking about groups of, individual prototype Rishaim, or not Rishaim, prototype people who don't know Chelik Olam Haba, right? The 3 kings and the 4 Hedyotot. And now we got to the Dorot, but we haven't talked yet about individuals, like practically speaking, which we're going to get to, by Anshe Erni Dachat. But says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva was talking about that because there was a discussion. Where are we up to? We are 4 lines from the last narrow line. The Tanya, the Breita, this is the Tosefta, says, what happens to Ktanei B'nei Rish'ei Yisrael? Right, they're going to be, we'll see later, Rishaim, people who are Rishaim of Yisrael who lose their Chelik and Olam Haba, and they get destroyed. What happens? They get killed, and they don't get Olam Haba. What happens to their children, right, who are not old enough to be part of the sin? So says the Breita, Ein ba'in l'olam haba. They also are part of the father's punishment is that they don't go to olam haba. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk at the end of Malachi, which I think we read as part of a parsha, right? Shabbat Hagadol. I think we can do this pasuk. Kinei hayom ba. The day is coming. Bo'er kitanur. V'haya kol zaydim mechol oisei rishah kash v'lahat otam. Right, Hashem will destroy and burn up all of the people who do evil. Hayom haba amar Hashem tzvaot asher lo yazov lahem. We will not leave for them shoresh va'anaf, any kind of root and branch of these people who are rishaim, and that refers to shoresh b'olam hazeh. Will have no remainder in olam hazeh, and there will have no anaf l'olam haba. Different Rabbi Gamliel. Says Rabbi Gamliel that people who are rishaim, who are destroyed by Hashem, as Malachi is talking about, will be wiped out in olam hazeh and olam haba. There's no future for their children either. Said Rabbi Akiva, I disagree. Rabbi Akiva said, the children who did nothing wrong, they are killed, unfortunately, for the sins of their fathers. They're wiped out with whatever plague and destruction and Holocaust, but they get a portion of Olam Haba. Shenemar, Shomer Pita'im Hashem, very famous pasuk, where Hashem watches the Pita'im. What does Pita'im mean? We often translate as those who are foolish, but here we mean those who are young. Shekem Bekorin Bekrachei Hayam, the Yanuka Patya. In the foreign languages, I don't know what that means always, right? But in some other language, they refer to Yanuka, children, as Patya. So Hashem will protect the Pita'im, the ones who did no sin, just because it will not punish them in the future for their father's sins. And furthermore, if Omer, there's another pasuk in Daniel, which says, let me get some English here, Godu ilana v'chablunani, right? Cut down the tree and destroy it. Bram ikar shoroshaya, cut out the roots. Bram ikar, take out the main part. Bram ikar v'shoroshaya ba'ar shavuku. Leave the shorashim in the ground. So what Hashem will do is Hashem will cut down the tree, which is the father and the generation that sinned, but will leave the roots in the ground so that they can come back and have a portion of Olam Haba. So then how do you understand the pasuk of Rabbi Gamliel? Elamani mikayim, the pasuk that says, Lo yazov lam shoresh va'anaf, they will not have any kind of root or branch left behind. What's the double language? That means that they will not, Hashem will not leave for them, lo mitzvah v'lo shiarei mitzvah. Hashem won't leave for them any zchut, anything good. I mean, they'll get credit for everything they've done right. Every mitzvah, every part of a mitzvah, they will get reward for, and then they'll be wiped out and get nothing more for all time. Davar acher, another pshat is shoresh zu neshama v'anaf zu aguf. That Hashem will wipe out the shoresh, which is the soul, which is the source of something, and the anaf, which is the branches, which is the actual physical body, that people who are rishaim will be destroyed out, shoresh v'anaf, but their children will not be destroyed, according to Rabbi Akiva. Aval, kitanei b'nei rishei umot olam, but the kitanim of those who are not Jewish, divrei calling that ein ba'im l'olam haba, they will not have a portion of olam haba. And that's meaning that only Bnei Yisrael have an automatic portion, so that if they haven't lost it, because they're still minors, then they get a chilek olam haba. But if you're katanei b'nei Rishei Umat Olam and you've never done anything, let's just say that's one way to read it, that makes you deserve olam haba, then you don't get it. Everyone agrees ein ba'im olam haba, and Rabbi Gamliel nafkalei mi b'tabed kol zeicher lamo. Rabbi Gamliel learns this out from another pasuk in Yeshayahu, which says we will make all memory of them be destroyed, meaning even their children. Now, Itmar, on this context, we'll do a few more lines, I think. Why not, right? A few minutes till Shachrit. Itmar says the Braita 5 lines from the bottom. Now that you start mentioning this discussion about individuals getting a Chelek Olam Haba and saying that it's automatic unless you lose it somehow, Katan Me'ematay Ba'al Olam Haba. What is the minimum age? When do you consider to be, I don't know, quote unquote, a person that you get a portion of Olam Haba? So Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimon Bar Rabbi, Chad Amar Mishash Nolad, the time you were born, right? From the moment of coming out into the world. Chad Amar Mishash Siper. The other one says, we don't know which one says which, that it's from the time that you get your first haircut. Oh, sorry, not first, Siper, that you speak, that you're the Saper, right? Like Sipur Yitziat Mitzrayim. That's when you learn to speak. That's when you become essentially a human, I guess, for this purpose. Manda Amar Mishash Nolad, the one who says it's from when you're born Shenemar, the pasuk says, Yavov Yagidu Tzidkato, come and tell us tzedek, la'am nolad ki asa, the nation that is born. So meaning from the moment that you are born, you are considered to have some righteousness already. From the time that you speak, it's another pasuk later in the same parak, actually earlier in the same parak of Tehillim, as it says, Zera Yavdenu, you will make Zera, you will make children, Yisupar Lashem Ladar, they will speak about God for all generations. So you see that it's from the time that you can speak that you can become a Chelek and Olam Haba. Itmar, another statement was, Ravina Amar Mishash Nizra. And in fact, a child, a fetus, I guess, gets a portion of Olam Haba from the time that they're conceived, right? They don't even have to be born. It says, Zera Yavdenu. The seed will come to serve you. So even the Zera of a person is serving Hashem. Rabbi Nachman Yitzchak says, Mishash Nimo, that in fact it's from the time that from a male gets a Brit Milah. Dichtiv Ani, also in Tehillim, I am poor, Vigovea Minoar, and I'm dying from, I'm dying basically. Govea is like someone close to death from being young. Nasati emecha afuna, I got terrors from afuna, and so basically it's referring to what happens to someone at the time of Brit Milah. Tana, one more, Braita, Mishum Rabbi Meir, Mishash Yomar Amen. The time that a child gets a Chelek Olam Haba is when they can articulate and they say the word Amen after something, after a bracha or something like that. Shenemar, as it says, beautiful drasha, to end today with, Pitzchu Sha'arim, open the gates for Yavo Goy Tzadik, righteous people will come in, Shomer Emunim, those who preserve Emunah. Al Tikre Shomer Emunim, Ela Shomer Amen. Right? The word Amunim and the word Amen are very similar, and it's referring to the nation that says Amen. Once you can say Amen, you get a Chelek Olam Haba. Let's do 5 more lines, 5 more words. Top line of Kuf Yud Aleph. My Amen. What does Amen refer to? Am Rabbi Chanina, El Melech Ne'eman. It's a reference, it's a nutrikan of Hashem. God is a true and righteous and just, not true, but a Ne'eman is reliable, a reliable king. And so that's what you're saying, El Melech Ne'eman. And so from the time that a child can say Amen, that's when the gates open for them and they have a Chelek Olam Haba. So a beautiful thing to end with today. Tomorrow, in the last couple of dapim, we will discuss some of the people who don't have a Chelek Olam Haba. And I wish everyone a Mazal Tov who finishes Sanhedrin. And I won't be here in person, I think, or even on Zoom in person for the next 3 weeks. So I will miss all of you. Hope everyone has a Chag Kasher B'Sameach. David will be doing it in person on Chag and Yom Tov for the next 2 weeks. So if anyone can join, please do. And continue learning, everyone. We'll see you.
Yasher Koach, Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
See you for
Thank
Shavuot.
you.
Take care.